Now is the Democratic mayor of Chicago, Brandon Johnson. Mayor, good to have you here on the show. Thank you.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
Obviously, you are talking to people in Chicago and by definition, the nation in this moment. And you need to express a bunch of these things, right? One is this is likely not legal. But more importantly, this administration, Stephen Miller, Russ Vought, Donald Trump, they're looking for confrontation. They're confrontation seeking at this point to justify their Insurrection Act.
That's exactly right. You know, the president of the United States of America, Donald Trump, has made it very clear that he has declared war on the city of Chicago. In fact, as you've indicated, he has declared war against American cities across this country. And what he is promulgating is very clear. It's unconstitutional. It's illegal. It's unnecessary, and it's dangerous. And I'm using every single tool that's available to me to defend the people of this fine city, to protect our democracy, and of course, to protect our humanity as well.
You and the governor and lots of people, every elected official we've talked to from Chicago, have had the same message to people. Don't take the bait. Don't give them any reasons to do anything. There's a lot of ways to protest without playing into what the government wants to say is happening in Chicago, Washington, D.C., L.A., Portland, Memphis.
Absolutely. Look, there's a long history in the city of Chicago of organizers petitioning the government to do right by its people, whether it's, you know, from the 1960s when Dr. King came to the city of Chicago fighting for fair housing, you know, whether it was the Rainbow Coalition that was put together by Reverend Jackson that led to two inevitable runs that eventually led to the first black president of the United States of America being elected, a peaceful assembling of people, challenging the government to do right by working people is really what built this nation. And in fact, that's really what the threat is. And that's why this president and his privatized military, ICE, has been intentionally invoking and escalating violence. They've shot and killed a man just outside the city of Chicago. They shot a woman just a week ago, unleashed tear gas against the people in the community that was on their way to grocery stores and sending their kids to school, as well as unleashing tear gas on our local law enforcement. Over 24 of our police officers were impacted by this. The initiator and the provocateur in this moment is Donald Trump, and we're not going to stand for it.
Remarkable images. Last week we talked about a helicopter and people rappelling down a building. It looked like a raid in a war. The zip tying of children. This doesn't seem to fit. Even if you voted for Donald Trump because you thought you wanted undocumented immigrants dealt with, this doesn't fit the narrative most people I've ever talked to who support Donald Trump thought was going to unfold in America.
Well, because it's not about immigration, and it's certainly not about crime. In fact, the federal government came to a district court right here in the city of Chicago, even after the president of the United States of America said it was about immigration and about crime. They literally argued that it was not about either one of them. This president and his administration cannot be trusted. And that's why, because the Congress refuses to hold him accountable, the city of Chicago most certainly will.
You have been targeted by the president. He said on Truth Social, Chicago mayor should be in jail for failing to protect ICE officers. Governor Pritzker also. You know, there was a time when you could sort of discount Donald Trump's social media posts as whatever, except he posts and then people get arrested. Tell me about how you're thinking about this.
Well, this is clearly the playbook of an authoritarian government. And that's why it's incumbent upon all of us throughout this country to push back fiercely against this tyrant. Look, our very democracy as we know it is under attack. And if there were ever a time for working people to unite around this country, this is that time. Look, I've started off as a public school teacher, organizing in communities to ensure that we protect the very fundamental rights of the access to education and housing and healthcare and transportation, good paying jobs. These are all of the things that we fought for after the Civil War. And now this president is literally attacking the sanctity of what this democracy is about, securing opportunities for every single person who wishes to call the city of Chicago or this country their home. That's what's under attack right now. But I'm grateful that there are organizers around the city of Chicago and throughout the country, as I have conversations with mayors, that are very clear and determined that we're going to defend this democracy, protect our humanity, and put an end to this tyrant.
The Insurrection Act, which has not been invoked, is very specific about people who are losing certain federal protections or states who cannot preserve the constitutional rights of their citizens. It's a very different situation. There's nobody who's saying that there isn't crime in Chicago and there aren't more shootings than you would like to have in Chicago or than anybody would like to have. But that's not actually what the use of the military under the Insurrection Act is supposed to do.
You're absolutely right. Look, I taught middle school in Chicago, and part of my responsibility was to make sure that our seventh graders knew the Constitution so that they can move on. You know, this president, his administration is literally trampling on the Constitution. And here's the point here. You either support the Constitution or you do not. You know, whether you supported this president or not, there's something fundamental about us protecting what our framers put in place, is that we have real check and balance. And as you indicated, look, there's no secret that we have poverty across this country. And where there is poverty, crime tends to follow. Now, I've made critical investments in youth employment. We've invested in mental and behavioral health care. We are expanding more affordable housing. We've invested in our detectives bureau so that we can actually bring some closure to the violence that people do experience. And we had the safest summer, the fewest amount of homicides since 1965. Though there's more work to be done, the military do not have policing or arresting authority. So even the very thing in which he's describing, federalizing the National Guard and militarizing our cities, will do nothing to build safe and affordable communities. He knows that. The world knows that. And it's incumbent upon all of us to continue to send a strong message that if you want safe and vibrant communities, you have to do what works in safe and vibrant communities, which is to invest in those communities. And that's what I'm doing in Chicago. And that's what I know that mayors across this country are doing. Last thing, if this president was actually serious about violence in this country, why would he take $800 million away from violence prevention programs? He cut the ATF budget by 30%. My local law enforcement worked with the ATF to get illegal weapons off the streets of Chicago that have been illegally trafficked from states that voted for him. Mm-hmm. But instead of actually investing in things that actually work, this president is interested only in fomenting chaos. And it's our responsibility in this moment to not just hold him accountable, but to make sure that we keep our communities calm, that we keep these communities secure, and of course, we keep these communities on a pathway to real solvency.
Mayor, good to see you. Thank you for joining us. The Chicago Mayor, Brandon Johnson, joining us now. We're going to take a quick break. More Velshi after the break.